And now joining our keynote speakers for one of our last discussions today is Carrie Filipetti, Executive Director of the Vandenberg Coalition. Primary in her career, she was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Cuba and Venezuela in the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs and the Deputy Special Representative for Venezuela at the US Department of State. Good to have you with us. Mark Voyger, Senior Non-Resident Fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis and Director of the Master of Science Program in Global Management at the American University in Kyiv. And the moderator of the panel is the previously mentioned István Gyarmati, Secretary General of the Hungarian Atlantic Council and the President of ICDT, the International Center for Democratic Transition.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As always, I'm in a very difficult position because we have heard some interesting contributions, and I'm not sure that we have time for too many more. But if you have a little contribution to make before we have a discussion, please do it now. And ladies first, if possible.
Great. I'll be very brief. I think the two biggest things that I would emphasize people focus on when we talk about Russia and Ukraine is, number one, what are the broader interests that are at stake? Why does the United States and Europe have to care specifically about what's going on? This is something we have to address in the United States a lot, with some of the skepticism about what's really what's at stake for us. And then the second is to sort of tie into something that Matthew said. He mentioned how Russia is a real threat to the sort of rules-based order. And I would just like to add, we all need to take a lot of accountability and responsibility for what we have all done over the last few decades to also diminish that order, allowing Russia to really take advantage of our weaknesses. So to just very briefly sort of just describe what our interests are. Number one, the ability for any of our countries to see Ukraine decimate the military of an adversarial nation is a pretty obvious advantage to all of us. Number two, it's critically important that we make it clear that no nation can redound benefits to them by attempting to take land by force. This is primarily a message to China about Taiwan. And then number three, we need to make it very, very clear that the threat against us is not Russia alone and not China alone, but the axis of aggressors that many people have mentioned. Few people know that the 3 American service members that were murdered by a drone from Iran in Jordan, the reason that the technique that the Iranians used with that drone was a technique that had been given to them by the Russians after learning their lesson fighting the Ukrainians with these Iranian drones. So we're seeing actual Americans being murdered by some of the lessons that were learned by the Russians. And then finally, on this question of the international system, when we talk about what comes next, fixing the system is so critically important. It's not about abandoning it. It's about understanding that the principles for which the United Nations and all of these other systems were founded are not principles that anyone is living up to. It is why Russia is able to get away with everything that it's doing. The ICC has a case against Putin. Nobody cares. He's still around doing what he wants to do. We've seen how countries have given aid to organizations like UNRWA despite their active support and endorsement of terrorism. And people have not only done nothing, they actively contribute to give to UNRWA under the guise of humanitarian assistance. We have allowed the terms of democracy, humanitarian aid, and other principles for which we stand to be completely hijacked by adversarial actors, non-state groups, as well as adversarial nations. And we all should take some accountability for that and figure out what comes next to make sure that we're really preserving those values.
Thank you very much. Mark?
Yeah. Thank you. And it's always challenging speaking after such a an inspirational speaker such as my good friend and colleague Kurt Volker at the American University Kyiv. So I turn to you for my brief intervention as an American citizen of Eastern European descent who actually works in Kyiv, has been working for many years now. So someone who really loves and appreciates Ukraine. Well, what I'm going to talk about today is what I'm going to call for is not your compassion as human beings. I'm going to talk to you about your self-interest as Europeans, Hungarians, Western Europeans, Americans, etc. As I was driving last night, 20 hours from Bulgaria through Romania to here, I remembered how in Soviet times, during those days, many of those cities and villages and towns were dotted with Soviet monuments. One of them stands quite high in my memory in a negative way. It's the monument of a certain Marshal Fyodor Tolbukhin. And if some of you remember Fyodor Tolbukhin's role in history, he was the commander of the group of forces called a Soviet front, a third Ukrainian front. It wasn't the first Russian front or second Russian front, it was the third Ukrainian front that crossed the borders of Romania, then of Bulgaria, then of former Yugoslavia, ultimately Hungary. You know what happened everywhere they went, to property, to women, to people, you know. So what do you think Putin's plan for Ukraine is, should Ukraine fall? And again, I don't want to believe this in the wildest dreams. I don't think it will happen, but let's move to an alternative reality where Ukraine doesn't stand, because we in the West have been too concerned with realism and with who gave what money and what we deserve, they didn't deserve, who they corrupt or not. Third Ukrainian front and the shadow of Marshal Tolbukhin, with the grinning face of Comrade Stalin, and of course the reincarnation in his own mind of Putin and his entourage in the Kremlin. That's what they want. That's what all of us, you know, we may see if Russia gets its way. It's not going to be a peaceful occupation whereby Russia just moves into Ukraine and just stays there for peacefully and just looks for prosperity and freedom and whatnot. No, it will use the man of those newly occupied territories, Belarus including, to create new Belarusian, new Ukrainian fronts. So what I'm asking again is not your tears, not your passion, compassion, etc., your self-interest. Ukrainians are buying us time. They've bought us already 3 years. How many more? I mean, we're reading reports of bases on the Russian side of the border in Finland, talking about potential exercises against the Baltic states, against Poland. All of these things are real, all of these threats are not imaginary, and again, Ukraine is fighting not only for its own survival, but for our own survival and well-being as Europeans. We need to give them everything and more. Probably, again, my colleague and friend Kurt will disagree, but I've been calling this plan since last year a Trump-proof plan. In other words, let's give our president the benefit of the doubt that he really wants peace. Okay, if he doesn't succeed, have a Trump-proof plan. Work within the European alliance system. Work with Canada, you know, obviously wealthy countries, Australia, Japan, South Korea. Have backup plans, and again, America, of course, is indispensable. But you know, if our leadership does not deliver, then you know that's not the end of the world. Ukraine is learning how to fight on its own, and quite successful at that. They will do it, whether we help them or not. The question is, for how long are we going to hold this wave, and how much time they're going to buy us? How well prepared we are? Are we going to wake up from the slumber and be ready, or we're going to continue in this illusionary reality, pretending that nothing is happening? Thank you.
Thank you very much. As always, we are under time pressure, so it's up to you to decide what we do. I offer you two options. One, I give you a 20-minute speech. It would be wonderful, I promise. The second one is we play a little game. And it's your choice, but this is like Russian elections. We don't need elections to know the result. So I'm pretty much sure you would regret, but not vote for my speech. So let's play a little game. Matthew, please give a 2-minute readout of today's Trump-Putin telephone call. What is the result?
It's a shame I was shopping for clothes for my son during the 2-minute during the phone call. I'm going to have to pass it to one of my colleagues to give 2 minutes on that. I know. If there's a readout of a phone call, then between Trump and Putin, then of course great things would have been decided and progress would have been made. And Putin, of course, is committed to peace, but it's going to take a little bit more time. And that there is more water to pass under the bridge, and that America stands firm in wanting peace in Ukraine. But nonetheless, if Zelensky and Putin won't come to the table soon, then the United States may walk away.
Very good. Okay, Kurt, you are next. You are President Zelensky. Please comment on the outcome.
Well, President Zelensky would have had his own call with President Trump afterwards, and I'm sure that he did not say, "I told you so." I think that characterization of the Putin phone call is about right. I can imagine Trump saying, "You've got to stop the war. I've got a lot of people who are pushing me. They want sanctions. They want military aid to Ukraine. Just stop this. We can do something better. We can have a better future. We can have meetings. We can do business. We can make money. Like, just stop this war because I don't want to go down this other road." And Putin would say, yes, 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 I agree with you. Yes, we do need to work together. We need to do business. I just need this first. We have to have a just peace. We have to handle these root causes that have caused all of this. So we just need more. And no outcome. And Zelensky would be, look, we called for a ceasefire. He rejects a ceasefire. He calls for negotiations. He rejects negotiations. He says he wants to address root causes. The root causes are that Vladimir Putin believes Russia has a right to take other people's land and rule over those people. He doesn't have that right, and so no one is going to be satisfied with that. So we're going to have to actually push back here. And Trump says, well, let's keep trying.
Thank you. And can I ask Ursula von der Leyen to comment?
You've given me the worst one. Gosh. You know, I really can't get in her headspace only because this is sort of part of my message. The European Union and you know, all of the sort of represent. I just came off another conference. It was a conference that I've been to a couple of times, and there's a lot of sort of mealy-mouthed sloganeering that happens, and I'm sure that would continue, and there would be this sort of gratuitous, you know, we thank the President of the United States for getting involved, and, you know, we sort of quietly pushing for a resolution. She would emphasize just and lasting and sustainable peace as opposed to just, you know, a peace at any cost, which I think is the European concern that of what the President might be pushing.
Thank you. And last but not least, President Macron.
Monsieur le Président, don't trust President Putin. No, but seriously, I think Macron has had his portion of Putin's poison in Africa and elsewhere, where France has strategic interests. So gone is the time when he was chasing, you know, Putin, trying to get phone calls and meet him, you know, in years past. Now I think the time for realism has returned to French foreign and defense policy. I mean, who would have thought that Macron and France, you know, would have been so I don't want to say belligerent, but really forceful in their assertive posture across Europe, nuclear weapons, landing them to other countries. So yeah, I think Macron has lost, and the French political class has, if they had any illusions about Putin and the Kremlin's desire for peace and justice, that time has passed and gone. So yeah, give more weapons to Ukraine would probably, that's what Macron would have said. Don't trust Putin and be firm, and don't fall into the trap I fell in, as I said years ago when I was thinking that Putin would deliver on his promises.
Very good. Thank you very much. We have 7 more minutes, so maybe another short round. And my question would be the following. The position of the National Security Advisor in the White House is vacant. You want to apply. What would you advise, Matthew?
I'm not sure I do want to apply, but be prepared for everything that you seek to explain and every bit of advice that you give to be potentially accepted and then reversed within 25 minutes. Frame America's interests in terms of playground contests, in terms of the way that teenagers, particularly teenage boys, interact with one another. I knew I was going to be able to get him in here somehow. Teenage boys quite typically have a very clear pecking order, and when someone tries to challenge it, they just get punched. And the hierarchy reasserts itself. So be prepared to explain international politics as a series of playground fights with a hierarchy, with America on top, right, making America great again, but at the same time, others in the room seeking to challenge that. Right? Russia, the upstart, China, the rising kid on the block, the new kid on the block, in fact, and one which seeks to knock over America's or to take America's crown. And I think if you phrase it in that way, you'd be able to get a fairly clear sense out of the president that American interests are worth fighting for. Goodies and baddies, and hierarchies of power.
I'm sorry, you don't get the job.
Thank you.
You were too realistic, so no way. Kurt, your turn, but do it in Hungarian.
Valószínűleg könnyebb lesz, hogy rávenni az elnököt magyarul. No, I am also not enthusiastic about applying for that job, but what I would say to President Trump, if I had the opportunity, is I think you have a good chance of achieving a lot of the things you're trying to achieve. I think that you will strengthen NATO. I think you will rebalance America's trade relationships in the world. You may even get peace in the Middle East. You may get peace in Ukraine somehow. But I think you can aim higher than that. I think that you can really achieve some great things worthy of a great legacy if you put a little bit more faith in people and humanity and values behind that, and you actually bring people together. Yes, you're going to have to push hard, you're going to have to insult some people, you're going to have to break some crockery from time to time. But if you can focus on achieving something really meaningful, which is securing the advance of freedom and humanity in the world beyond any one of those issues where you actually might win.
Thank you very much. Pretty good. But one thing was missing, so you are shortlisted, okay? Carrie, please.
I'll say 3 quick things. The first is to not ever pull anything off the table before you're in the negotiation room. This is, I think, a mistake that even President Trump has made, despite him saying not to do that, that has been done in a few instances. The second is to recognize that the threat against the West and the United States is not simply China, it's this axis of aggressors. There was the spokesman for the Iranian sort of their foreign affairs committee said in 2022 that Iran was actively working with China and Russia to create a triangle of powers that would specifically challenge American hegemony. And so we need to recognize the threat that our enemies have laid out for us as a singular threat. And then the third thing, don't be more afraid of escalation than your enemy is. And I think this is a mistake that we've made many, many times. Escalatory risk is when they kill one person, we kill one person. Okay, so then you'll kill two people. Okay, so then you'll kill three. It's the incremental steps are actually far more threatening of escalation than what I would call a decisive overmatch, right? The killing of Qasem Soleimani, done. If that was the reaction to their action against us, then they were very afraid of what the action would be if they responded. So we need to sort of retake that escalation narrative away from people who are afraid to ever respond in fear of provoking.
Thank you very much. You have no chance. You are too smart for a woman. Mark, try.
Yes, I will just borrow what my good friend Vladimir told me today and reminded me actually that wars over the last 100 years have been lost in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, and I'll add that over the last century, wars have started in Eastern Europe and have been lost in Eastern Europe. Luckily, in 2025, the vacuum of power has moved 1,000 or more kilometers to the east. So luckily for us, for you Europeans and us Americans. But what I would like to say is that any national security advisor who thinks that by putting the conflict or Russia's aggression against Ukraine on the back burner, kind of hastily trying to wrap up this conflict and reorienting America's or West's attention to East Asia, to the global South, to different regions, which of course are important, of course are super populous. That's not going to help us stabilize the global security system. We need to handle the transatlantic security space is central. No matter what people in Washington, D.C. may feel, every successive administration, we need to solve the problem as it exists today. We need to cauterize the ulcer of Russian ultranationalism and imperialism. And neo-Soviet expansionism. That's as simple as that to say, not as simple to make it happen. But the focus needs to be here. As soon as Europe and the European and the Euro-Atlantic space is stabilized, then we can look toward China or other areas. I know it's easier said than done, but start with where the heart of the crux of the problem is, which is still the Eastern European space.
Thank you very much. The problem is that I have a much better...
Azért üres a szék.
I have a much better solution, a much better candidate, myself. And I don't want the job, but I would be great. And I tell you what's the secret, what my submission was. My submission was, Mr. President, you are great. You can solve it. What? Anything. And you are the only one who can solve it. Doesn't matter how. The most important thing is that you get the Nobel Peace Prize. And you will. Thank you very much. That concludes.